Welcome to Concerned Citizens Presents. Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods is an organization dedicated to peace, economic and social justice, good government, and a clean environment. Every month, we invite an expert to enlighten us on a topic related to our mission. Because Village TV videotapes these presentations, we can share that expertise with a larger audience. We hope you enjoy today's broadcast.
Good evening. Our speaker this evening is Dr. Andrea De Vizcaya Ruiz. Her topic is microplastics, pollution, and health. Dr. De Vizcaya Ruiz is an environmental toxicologist and an associate professor in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health in the Program of Public Health at UC Irvine. A long title to that department. She holds a bachelor's in veterinary medicine from the National Autonomous University of Mexico and a PhD in toxicology from the University of Surrey in England. When our focus group met in December to discuss topics for this year's Moldow program, microplastics was our concern of choice. The ubiquity of microplastics in the environment has raised concerns about their potential risk to human health and their environmental impact. Our speaker's work focuses on the study of our body's responses and biointeraction from the exposure to air pollutants, atmospheric particles, and to the advanced materials including nano and microplastics. Dr. Vizcaya de Ruiz, we look forward to your talk, and we welcome you to the Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods Village. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me. I feel honored, and I have very big shoes to fill after I heard about you as a community and about the Moldow family. So I will do my best to be up to the standard. And as Lee just mentioned, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about microplastics and their implication in health. So I think we're all familiar with this image, which is what it's more and more common. We're looking at this type of situations where we're accumulating all these polymers, all these plastics, and where is this going to take us to? So, So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about microplastic pollution and human health, and I've divided my talk by explaining what are the sources and type of microplastics. Do microplastics, or do they enter, or can they enter into the body? What's the evidence about health effects or effects to human health? And finally, where is the road, or where can we go from here? Is it possible to change or to swap to more sustainable or safer use of plastics? So the discussion is open, the floor is open, and I'll be very happy to discuss any part of this topic. So first, I think it's important to define or have a definition of what we're going to be talking about. So, what are the sources and type of microplastics? What are plastics? Plastic is a synthetic material made from polymers, which are long chains of molecules. So really, just like we have monomers. Monomers it's a molecule, mostly organic, that can react together with all other monomers. So each part of this would constitute a monomer, and they're going to form a larger type of polymer chain, a three-dimensional chain or network, into a process called polymerization. So each one of these, like puzzle pieces, are going to come in together to form a larger chain. And some examples of this type, or what we understand as monomers, are glucose, which is actually a natural monomer, vinyl chloride, amino acids, ethylene, examples of monomers, and each monomer is going to link to each other to actually form a polymer. Polymer is going to be a change of these little puzzle pieces, or these monomers, and it's defined as any class of natural or synthetic substance composed of very large molecules that are called macromolecules, and a multiplication or multiple chains of monomers are going to form a polymer, and this formation of polymer is going to form a structure, polymerization, and that's what we know as a plastic. The polymers, we have different examples: synthetic fibers, polyethylene cups, fiberglass, nylon bearings, plastic bags, etc., etc. And I'm going to describe and talk to you a little bit about each one of them. Just to exemplify, we have natural type of polymers like DNA, rubber, wool, or cellulose. And then we have the man-made or the synthetic polymers that we use for our utensils or appliances: nylon, polyester, Teflon, or epoxy. So that would be like the main difference between a natural polymer and what we use as a chemical reaction in the lab that brings us a new product. What is the real issue, or why are we worried about microplastics? So you can see it's the production, of microplastics. So from 1950 to the estimation right here to 2020, even 2025, more than half of the plastics are produced have been produced in the last 24 years. So this is just an uphill production. The forecast for 2025, plastic has a very slow degradation in nature, so it is easily accumulated in the environment. So why is it a big issue, or why are we so worried? Because the fact that it's being generated exponentially and it's going to stay very long in the environment, it's going to logically address us or put us in a situation where we're going to be in more contact with this type of materials. What's the main issue? So we have all this type of materials: plastic bags, cups, bottles, and they are thrown into the environment, and they slowly degrade into smaller type of products or materials. So there's an inappropriate disposal of the plastic waste, degradation and formation of the microplastics, and then we have the accumulation. And unfortunately, this accumulation happens in other living organisms. In this case, we're looking at this fish. So right now, we are aware that the presence of these plastics that initially were used to solve or to give us a commodity, now they're being disposed into nature, and they're even affecting other living organisms. How does this degradation happen? How does this mechanism takes place? We have 4 different ways on how the degradation of plastics happen in nature. There's the biological degradation, which is caused by microbes. There's the chemical degradation, where it's caused by different chemical reactions like oxidation or hydrolysis. There's a mechanical or physical degradation, which is caused by cracking, embrittlement, or even flaking. And there's an involvement also by UV light, or the photodegradation, caused by basically the sunlight. So if we see in this picture, we have the 4 types of different degradations: the biological degradations that involve the microorganisms and enzymes, the chemical degradations that will involve chemical reactions like hydrolysis and oxidation, the mechanical degradation, and the photodegradation, where there's involvement of the UV light and other chemical reactions like reactive oxygen species. But also there's an influence, or the subsequent mechanism is going to depend on the type of polymer, which we talked about, if it's a natural polymer or it's a man-made polymer, the time frame on what this happens, the environmental conditions that are influencing, and there are other factors, and all these are going to come into place to form the tiny plastics. And then we go again, and it's like a cycle that is happening in the natural world and the environment all the time. But what are really microplastics? So what do we understand by microplastics? Microplastics are tiny plastic particles that are less than 5 millimeters in size. So we can call them, like, we have primary plastics, where are the big or the primary material that it comes from, and as a secondary product, we have the microplastics. But not only that, we also have what we can call nanoplastics, which would be those that are below 1 micron. So this will be natural in the erosion of larger plastics through physical, chemical, or biological processes, and they will generate nanoplastics. So in the world of microplastics, we also include the nanoplastics, and we are also in the possibility of being exposed or in contact with this type of materials. So what are the importance? Here you can see this is a picture that has been very much portrayed to expose this problematic. You can see there's hair around it, but this could be picked up in any floor, and you see the tiny, tiny pieces. So the microplastics are heterogeneous. It's an heterogeneous pollutant. It is now recognized as a pollutant, and it has different characteristics like their size, their shape, their complex chemical compositions, and also they can be vectors. A vector is a carrier, and they can be carrier of other agents. They can be carriers of other physical agents or other chemical agents and even other biological agents. Where are they in the environment? They have a lifetime in the environment because, as I said, mostly it's a product that we fabricate and that it will be thrown into the environment. So there will be an entry into our environment. There may be a transport, a horizontal transport, because these very tiny pieces of material can float in the air and be transported. And there'll be precipitation, so they'll go back into our system. And this process is going to be happening once and once again. So we throw them back, and then we receive them again. And we throw them back into the environment, and then we receive them again. Synthetic textiles, erosion from rubber tires, and dust from cities are considered to be the main source of primary microplastics, which through wind can transfer and are responsible for the 7% of the ocean plastic and pollution. This slide is to show you that it's not only the microplastics that are in the water, it's also the microplastics that are in the air and that can come back to the ocean or to the water sources and go back into the air and then come back into the environment. There have been many studies around the world where it's been documented the presence of microplastics. Around 15 to 51 trillion microplastics have been identified in the world's oceans, the highest concentrations being in areas where there's high human activity, which is mostly in the Mediterranean Sea and the North Atlantic Ocean, which is telling us that there's a relationship with human activity and the presence of this contaminant in the sea. In freshwater systems, up to 90% are from clothing fibers, and they also have been found, as I mentioned before, in soil and in the air. So right now, unfortunately, we have found, or microplastics have been identified or reported to be present in salt, in fruits and vegetables, of course in water, even in beer, and in the air. I didn't mean anything, I just said even in beer. So we can stop looking. We know microplastics are ubiquitous around everywhere we go, and they're pretty much everywhere. So should we be worried about this? I'm going to describe a little bit about each type of microplastic, which product they come from, what are the most common products, and what do we know about them. So first we have polyvinyl chloride. Polyvinyl chloride are basically the cleaning products, pipes that are used for electrical coatings, or what you normally call or we know as PVC. So we use them a lot in the households. They're used for construction, but it's a very hard type of plastic. And once it's degraded, it will take a very long time to get rid of. Then we have polystyrene. Polystyrene is your common styrofoam. It contains, it's also in containers or in hard packaging and toys. And it was very popular to store food, but now we know we should avoid trying to use it. It takes years and years to get rid of it in the environment. And also, if you eat hot from this type of materials, you are leaking some of the toxic chemicals into your food. Then we have polyethylene terephthalate. Polyethylene terephthalate is what is mainly used for water bottles, jars, or lids. And also this PET, which is normally known as PET, it's also known to be very soft, but also to be leachable or breakable, and this will make it, or it allows for a higher degradation, which will make it more available for us in the environment and for us in the exposure. Then we have polyester. So polyester, it was very popular and has been very popular to use for textiles, but also these textiles take a very long time in the environment to get rid of. We have polyethylene, which are bottles and containers for grocery bags. And finally, we have polypropylene, which it's in yogurt containers, in hangers, straws, and bottle caps. And why am I taking time to describe each one of them? Because following in my slides, I will show you how this has linked to the process in the human body. There's a second layer to this situation, and that's why I started my title with unwrapping. The second layer is the additives that come with the plastics. So what are additives and what are they used for? Additives are used, as its name, to add a new property to the plastics. So we have some additives like functional additives that include stabilizer, antistatics, flame retardants, plasticizers, or even curing agents. We have colorants. So for instance, all the bags that are used for chips, they have colorants inside in the plastics. And there are substances as dyes or pigments that will give color to the plastics, and some are added to give a bright or transparent color. Then we have fillers. The fillers are added to change or improve the physical properties of the plastics, but they can be minerals, metals, ceramics, bio-based gases, liquids, or even other polymers. The reinforcements. The reinforcements are like meshes to make it harder or have a certain type of flexibility and stiffness. This can be glass fibers or even carbon fibers. And then there are non-intentional other substances. This would be like contaminants or impurities into the plastics. But the fact that these impurities are bound or near or together with the plastic, of course, they become a bioproduct that will break down and we can also be exposed to. These non-intentional other substances can be pesticides, can be metals. So basically, the additives are used or have been invented to be used as enhancers of barrier properties, to improve transparency or gloss, for a better printing and sealing properties, or for antimicrobial activity. So all this, the type of plastic and the additives will constitute all the materials we know that we use in the supermarket, the glasses, the bottled waters, the bags, where we get the fruit and those nice boxes that are so shiny. They are very complex materials that have been designed for our commodity, but now they're also, we are worried because how can they enter or do they enter the body? So the first worrisome or the first studies were done in Europe, in the UK and Belgium around 2017 by some researchers that they were looking at or they identified the presence of plastics in the gut of fish and shellfish. And this was worrisome because if we're eating these products or these organisms, that means we're also eating the microplastics. Also, it was more worrisome for like mollusks or shellfish because this would mean that we're eating the entire animal, not just because maybe with a fish we avoid eating the gut of the fish, but with a shellfish or other seafoods, we'll eat the whole animal, which means we're actually eating the microplastic. The microplastic, yeah, please don't go away from your oysters. We all love oysters. But it's true, these animals in nature are filters. They're filters of the ocean, and they will filter, but they will accumulate this type of materials. And yeah, so we've got the microplastics. I talked a little bit about how do they degrade and fragment in the environment, and they will be shredding over time into fibers that are smaller and smaller than and they'll be smaller than the strand of human hair, and that the particles will be so small that they can also easily become airborne. So these investigators made a reflection, and they said, well, okay, what will be more worrisome? The plastics that we can get from what we're eating, or all the plastics that are floating around because they're going back into the air, as I mentioned before. They're invisible plastic fibers floating in the air, and they came into the conclusion that if they had a big mussel dinner, they wouldn't be so worried about the plastics that they're eating, and they'll be more worried about all the plastics that are around in clothes, in the carpets, in the upholstery, and they'll account for a larger amount of plastics than the ones that are eating in their delicious mussels. So where do we go from here? There's two main exposure routes. What is that? The exposure routes are the main roads how they're going to go into the body. So the main exposure routes for microplastics are the ones that they come from the air that we breathe and whatever we eat or drink. So there's an estimation that one person per year can ingest up to 121,000 microplastics and by inhalation, and from what we eat or drink, it can be up to 52,000 microplastics per person per year. So this is important to consider because there's also some discussion about the skin, if we can absorb or not, but there's very little evidence concerning this route of exposure. But definitely via mouth or via our lungs, there's a possibility to incorporate or to uptake these materials in the body. This paper, and the reason why I'm showing you, because it made a lot, this paper was published just last spring, 1 year ago, and it's one of the first evidence of the discovery and quantification of plastic particles in human body. So what they did is they invited 22 human volunteers that they donated their blood, and with a very sophisticated technology, which is a mass spectrometry with shot pyrolysis, which is really like a little spit of the blood, and then there's like a laser, and what this is going to identify is the structure of the tiny, tiny, tiny pieces of plastics that we saw before, and this equipment will identify the presence. So normally in blood you should have plasma, erythrocytes, all the good things that are in the blood and that make us survive and be healthy, but there's no reason why there should be plastics in our blood. So this was the first evidence, and what they saw is that there were plastic particles of below 700 nanometers, which account for microplastic according to our definition that we used at the beginning. They identified polypropylene or PP, polyethylene or PE, polyethylene terephthalate, which is PET, and the polyester PS. All of these appliances that we are looking at and using in our everyday life, correct? So the link of the exposure with the presence of these plastics, that's what basically accounts for the reason why this would be. And they discovered this in 17 of the 22 volunteers, so there's still hope. Not everybody has been exposed, right? But then this is, excuse me, this is random. So a mass concentration of the polymeric component of the plastic was measured in the blood, and this is, as I said, the evidence that there is a bioavailability or biointeraction for the uptake into the human bloodstream for this type of materials that normally were only being used as products of commodity. Then other studies have also taken place, and then it's been established that there's a frequency in different matrices, what we call of the human body, like feces, placenta, lung, and blood, and the frequency, the quantity of the plastics, the size of the plastic by different methods, but again the same, the usual suspects that we've been discussing. There are the ones that are in PET, the bottles, the polyester, which is the foam, the PE, which is what is used in the lids for the bottles. So right now, what is the evidence? There's no epidemiological studies or epidemiological evidence that have associated diseases in humans from microplastic exposure. However, as I just showed you, the presence of microplastics is in the body, so what does this mean? Should we be worried? Would be concerned? And with these studies, what would be the potential responses or the potential toxic mechanisms that could be involved to eventually induce some adverse effects? So what do we know right now? What are toxic effects? The microplastic can induce different toxic responses or toxic effects, which is any response of the body which precedes or alters the normal function of a tissue, an organ, or a system. So we have different types of alterations. We have alterations of the biological processes, physical damage, chemical damage, bioaccumulation, and other pollutants. And if you remember, when we talked about the degradation of the microplastics, we were also talking about chemical type of reactions, physical type of reactions, biological type of reactions. So basically, they're going to repeat the same thing as in nature. A physical damage is going to be caused by the interaction, and we know that this type of processes or this type of contact can lead to processes like inflammation, cell death, impaired organ function, and for example, some microplastics have been reported to block the digestive of the respiratory tract or lead to digestive problems or respiratory distress. Then we have chemical toxicity. Why do we describe it as a chemical toxicity? Because as I explained, some of the additives are going to be labeled as toxic chemicals that are added to the plastic. They can leach out into the environment, but they can also leach out within our system, and then they can cause some type of processes like, again, inflammation. They can be toxic to organisms, and these are going to be related with the additives that come with the plastics, like plasticizers, flame retardants, or UV light stabilizers. Then we have the bioaccumulation. Bioaccumulation refers to the contact, the presence, but also the deposition that it stays and accumulates in the body of the organism over time. So time is a very big factor here, and it may lead to toxic effects, particularly concerning for organisms at the top of the food chain, humans, and they can be exposed to higher concentrations of the microplastics and associated toxins because we are the consumers of everything that is in this planet. And finally, the alteration of biological processes. The alteration will involve disruption of biological processes which interfere with the normal function of biological processes like reproduction, growth, development. They can also become hormonal disruptors, leading to reproductive and developmental problems in the organisms. But why are they so sneaky and they go into the body and generate this type of responses? There are different factors of the microplastics that will influence, like their size, their shape, or their chemical nature. But very important is the time of exposure. So these two factors will account for the length of the exposure and the level that we could understand, like the concentration or the amount, is what's going to determine whether something is adverse or toxic to our body but also in this case, if we take the characteristics of the microplastics, the possibility or the probability is pretty high because we know they're very tiny, they know they're not going to be expelled from our body, they're not going to be degraded outside our body, and we know that they can disrupt. And how do they disrupt? They do it through these mechanisms, what we understand like mechanisms of toxicity. A mechanism of toxicity is what's going to alter. So this is a very important part of your body, which is a cell, and it's my favorite thing to study in life. A cell, you know, we're all formed by different types of cells, and we have a nuclei, and we have, each cell has different small organisms like mitochondria, vacuoles, or different organelles. The membrane also has very important functions, but once the microplastics are in presence or in contact, for instance, with membrane proteins, they will disrupt or they will interrupt the different processes. They can stimulate the formation of reactive oxygen species and then induce cell death, damage the mitochondria, damage the nuclei, and they can also be transported to other organs. So mainly the mechanisms of toxicity play a very important role in the response that we have for the exposure. Yes, thank you. I got a little excited. I love my job. Thank you, I'm sorry. So, what is the evidence for humans? Or I just showed you the evidence of the contact or the closeness that there is with studies in humans, but I wanted to take a different step where I separate from the response in the human body. So I just explained the mechanisms of toxicity, which is the hypothesis. We believe it's going to happen, but do we have evidence that this is happening? So there are some suggestions that the exposure to microplastics can affect neurodevelopmental disorders and contribute to Alzheimer, to attention deficit disorders, autism, cognition. Also, they can be hormonal disruptors. They can affect or induce events that are related with the respiratory system or cardiovascular diseases, metabolic diseases, and also a decrease in the response to antibodies or to vaccines. They can affect reproductive health adults or the reproductive systems, and there can be some outcomes that are related with pregnancy and the life in the womb or before we are born. So these are hypotheses that we believe can happen because we know microplastics are toxic, and we know if they affect some of our main systems or organs, which because we know flame retardants have this type of responses, plasticizers may also have this type of responses. So a lot of the information is taken from the fact that for the last 40 years we have been studying particle toxicity. Myself only for 20 because I'm a little bit here. But yeah, there's a lot of evidence on what's the contact of particles in the body. A lot of this evidence is coming from studies of air pollution mainly, but we know that this is a complete fact. The second fact would be toxicity of the components of plastic has been described. So if we put these two together, we can say that there is enough evidence to believe that lung diseases like asthma, COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, even cancer that are affecting millions of of people could be related to the exposure of pollutants, and this is definitely qualifying as a major type of pollutant. So another study that was published, here they analyzed in lung tissue, using also a very sophisticated technology, the detection of different microplastics. This tissue sizes, or this tissue, they got it from people that had lung tumors that were being removed, and part of the procedure is to also take out part of the healthy tissue. And in this study, they were able to acquire this healthy tissue from different levels of the lung. So we get what's impacting and near the bronchi. Once we go a little bit further into the respirable, and then in the interchangeable part where we interchange gases in the lung. And the important thing is they digested the tissue, and then they threw it through this sophisticated also machinery or method that is identifying the structure of the type of plastic, and they were able to identify in the 3 different levels of how of the lung. So when we breathe, the air is going to impact first near the bronchi, and then it's going to go deeper into the lung. And they were able to identify, you see, each of the different plastics has a different color, and the deeper into the lung, which also coincides what we've seen with very tiny particles in the air. So mainly the plastics that they identified were those plastics related with the lids of bottles, plastic bottles, the foam again, and the polyethylene that is made for bags. And here they studied human lung tissue, 13 samples that they ran through spectroscopy with a limitation of 3 micron, and they were able to identify 39 different microplastics, being with an average of around 1.42 microplastics per gram of tissue. And also the interesting thing is that they identified 39 different types of plastics, but mainly in the more profound or in the respirable section of the lung. So these are some images of the plastics or the microplastics they found in the lung tissue. So this evidence definitely is telling us that there is a contact, and that eventually there'll be a response for the presence of this foreign agent in our lung tissue. And finally, this other study asked, okay, what could happen? What are the implications during pre-birth? And for this, they used experimental animals. They used gestational rodents, where they actually gave them intentionally polyester nanospheres to see whether they would be translocated into the placenta, but also they found it in the fetal tissues after the exposure. So what could be the potential implications for this? So they observed that their micro and nanoplastics were able to cross the placental barrier. The placental barrier is a very tight joint organ because it has the function to protect the baby, but also it will feed the baby through the umbilical cord. And they also observed, they also observed that there was an accumulation of these materials, especially in the vascularity around the placenta, and that they passed this and they even went into the different fetal tissues. So here they observed what you see in red, that big stained red, are the plastics. These 4 pictures are the presence of these plastics in placenta, and these ones are in the different tissue organs. So here we have the kidney of the fetus, we have the liver, here we have the brain, this is the brain, this is the lung. So the worrisome situation is that the placenta is not actually filtering, and they're going into the tissues of the newborns, So this would also happen in a situation in humans if we consider that the mother could have the presence of the microplastics in their circulatory system or in the blood. And finally, this study is actually being done by a student that I collaborate with. And for this study, we are using this model, which is the zebrafish, which is a tiny fish that is normally you see in the aquariums. And for this study, we're working with the embryo of the zebrafish, because there's different processes that can be studied and that talk to us about the neurological development. So for this, what you see here, each one of these double circles, it's an embryo of the zebrafish. These are the controls. And then you see how they're exposed to the different types of plastics. So normally this process is a spontaneous contraction test in the zebrafish embryos. Can you click on this square? Can you click on this square? It's like a little video. Yeah. So you see the spontaneous contraction test that it's quite slow. It goes in a normal type of pace. And the idea was to compare this spontaneous contraction that is happening during the development of the organism, what happens when there is the exposure to the plastics. So if you see the comparison on how the movement goes on here, you can see, for instance, with polystyrene that it's a little bit much slower, the same with the polyvinyl chloride. And then, for instance, with the polystyrene, you see the presence of the different plastics, and also there's a different amount of contractions, but also a different kind of stimuli. So in this exercise, we were able to account, we had to count many, more than 200 of each one of those little embryos. And then we established that there was no change, so we have the control, the polystyrene low dose, the polystyrene high dose. With polystyrene, we saw no change, although we saw the accumulation of the beads around it. We saw that the two types of polyethylene and polyvinyl chloride, they generated hypoactivity of the spontaneous contractions, and then PET, PP, and nylon generated hyperactivity or induced hyperactivity of the spontaneous contractions. So P is the one that shows that the most severe effect of hypoactivity. There are inhibitory effects that have also been reported for this activity with pesticides that are related to the decrease of heart rate. PVC only showed a significant change at the lower concentration. And then we have PET that it only showed a significant change at the higher concentration. Nylon showed a hyperactivity at the concentration that was measured. And BP only showed a significant change in the high concentration. These events can be related, hyper and hypoactivity responding or because of the contact to the microplastics can be linked to potential mechanisms that have been involved to oxidative stress and also to neurological damage and cardiovascular damage. So where are we, or what should we do? Can we do something different? So we don't need to freak out in the sense that if I touch a plastic chair, then I'm going to get all these situations. No, we're trying to generate studies, look at the evidence and see, is there a risk? Eventually, will there be a disease link? There are many years to go to know whether there'll be a link, because this has happened with other many chemicals in the environment, with air pollution, with water pollution, etc., etc. But we can have pretty good hits of what's going to happen if we don't stop the presence of microplastics in the environment. We definitely don't want to do this anymore. Like Do not reuse your water bottles. The water bottles are designed for a single use. Do not microwave plastics because this will stimulate the leakage of the different materials into your food. So these are things that you want to avoid, but we don't need to freak out like right now everything that we touch with plastic is going to make us sick. Of course not. It's just that we need to think about what are the consequences of what we are observing and where we are now. So we have evidence that the plastics are in the environment, the plastics are in the water. There's a high possibility we're eating them in the fish, in the shellfish, etc. And that they're gonna like travel all around our organism. They're gonna get in touch with our nerves, with our DNA, and even with our in the womb with the fetuses. So there's a very much need for a risk assessment. We are exactly in the moment to take action and say, okay, what do we know now? I don't know if you're familiar with the risk assessment exercise. The risk assessment exercise is what our experts do to take action and to make decisions and policies and it's an exercise of 4 steps. The first step is hazard identification, hazard characterization, exposure assessment, and then risk characterization. And I strongly believe, and I'm happy to discuss it, that I've shown you evidence of these 3 today with the different studies that I've been able to describe for you. And well, basically, we can get together and finish the exercise. And are we at risk? That would be the question that will be open. And this is what normally our agencies are taking place. The HEPA hierarchy says, okay, we need to minimize, reuse, recycle, energy recovery, and treatment of disposal. But there are things that we need to worry about and start looking at, which is sustainable development goals. So the origin, shape, size, fate, distribution, migration, and persistent organic pollutants attached to biofilms are definitely going to have an impact or an ecotoxicological effect that is going to also be related to our health. So what's the road ahead? We have a lot of work to do, right? So the facts are, we know that microplastics are all over the place. We know that their presence is, we've seen them. If you go to the beach and you take a little bit of sand, you will see the presence. So before you're thinking, oh, these beautiful shells, they're all different colors now. Oh, maybe it's crystal, you know, from bottles that are green or brown. But more and more, it's like, I think this is plastics, right? So the plastics are there. We know we have a problem. Are they? Sorry? Whether the presence in the water leads to a problem. No. We don't know whether we'll have a disease, but we definitely know they are present. Do we know if they are inert and that they're going to lead to an immune response in the body, that they will lead to scarring, fibrosis, or cancer? These are the questions that we are asking ourselves. But definitely we have the evidence that they're in the body. Definitely we have the evidence that this type of toxicities or diseases are related with the exposure of other contaminants. So the potential of having this situation is very, it's a high probability, and also the duration of the exposure. How long you are exposed to is very important. So it's important to make decisions now in terms of policy and action before we actually have a problem. So we can also wait 20 or 40 years and then start getting those studies where there was an association of the exposure to this and that, to microplastics, and then see the development of diseases. Or we can try to get rid of the microplastics right now and then avoid all those associations and all diseases. And then, well, that's just what I said. So do we want to wait 20 or 40 years to know the implications, or can we start working on this now and avoid the exposure to microplastics? And There are different roads that we can take. It's going to be a long, long line, but knowledge opens the door to the opportunity. This is a phrase that it's very popular for knowledge, opens the door to opportunity, achievement, success, and wealth. But I would like to change it, and health, and a clean environment. So we have to put all the heads together in engineering, in public health, in toxicology, in chemistry, in medicine, and in all the sciences that we can think of to try to make some important changes. First, we need to work on different types of materials. These materials have been developed for the commodity, but we can also invest and think about different engineering solutions to make perhaps developmental biodegradable plastics, technologies that reduce plastic pollution, and then technologies that reduce the use of plastic. The immediate thing we can do is reduce, reuse, recycle, not reuse the plastics for human consumption, just reuse the sense of how we use the plastics, avoid exposure to bad plastics, and very important, the appropriate waste disposal. So if we are able to make an appropriate waste, then there are processes that are already in place for the waste management that can proceed. But if we put in a mixture all the different types of residues that we get from food, we don't do recycling, then of course we're gonna increase the type of processes that are needed to get rid of this type of materials. What are the bad plastics? What I call the bad plastics are any plastic that smells like solvent is not a good plastic. Any plastic that you touch and you get the stain of the ink, it's not a good plastic. And soft plastics tend to be more leachable than hard plastics. So you should try to use, of course, when I say soft plastics, I mean from like bottles or from boxes. Soft plastic would be a bag, and that has a certain purpose to be soft, of course. But what I mean is, if you're gonna buy like Tupperware or something to container to put your food, try to use crystal instead of plastic. And there are small solutions like that that we can find all the time. And then support science and education. I work in the UCI, as Liz said, so I'm always going to go for supporting science and education because this is where it's going to lead us to the next solutions that are related with the huge problems that we have. And I invite you to scan this. These are a lot of the studies that we do at the School of Public Health, Program of Public Health at UCI. We have different studies that are related with the population in Orange County. There is a study on air filtration interventions to assess health benefits to elementary students, forever chemicals or PFAS, the identification of the exposure in drinking water that is related to childhood cancers in LA and Orange County, lead exposures and implications for children's health across the life course, anti-vaping endeavor. This is important for our young people. Reduce the risk of vaping about Orange County middle and high school students, and determining risk of invasive mosquito habitats and spread of infectious diseases. If you scan this, it's going to take you to the public health news, and you'll see all the exciting projects that we carried out in our school. And finally, thank you very much for your attention. I hope I've been able to share with you my concern and also the evidence that there is, so we don't need to freak out and never touch a plastic again. But yes, we need to take some actions so we can start changing the formula, changing the paradigm, and who knows, maybe pressure in some places where we can have influence, so we can stimulate for more sustainable type of plastic, less use of plastics, and eventually have them less present in the environment. Thank you very much.
A wonderful introduction to all this. It was very informative and very educational. In the meantime, we have become a throwaway society. And most of the things that we carry on in a picnic basket is lightweight plastic, not glass, so it would break. You wouldn't put glass in if you're taking a shower and you have a shampoo thing. So there's a lot of places you would not use glass, okay? Now, my question to you is this. It starts with the manufacturer and the chemicals that he's using, because the fish and the curly things like shrimp and lobster and all these other animals in the ocean are, if you throw chemicals into the water and the streams and everything, it goes out to the ocean. We all know that. So you have to stop the manufacturer of doing that. Now here in the village we recycle, okay? I don't know what they do with the stuff when they burn it and take my trash out. I have no idea how they do it. Then they say you should recycle certain things. What do you recycle it again with? Most women wear clothes that come, and men, and our children, wear clothing that may come from polyester and all these things. So what my question to you, how do you stop it? It starts with the manufacturer and what he's putting into the stream.
Thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. If we have a possibility of putting pressure on the manufacturer, of course that helps. Of course that's the way, and that's how I was proposing. If we invest in science and education, then we can also have new technologies or new inventions where we can offer to these manufacturers, because they have a one sole purpose, which is they want to make money, right? So they're going to try to make money using the least to get the most. And we need to oblige them to suggest, to propose, to maybe not propose, make them change that paradigm. Yes, they want to make money, but also we need to be in a safe place. And there are little things that we can do, like you were saying, like fast fashion is a big contributor for microplastics. Fast fashion is all that new clothes that you buy that they're only good for 3 months and then you're going to throw them away. This happens a lot with young people. So maybe buying in the thrift stores could be something that you could do, or buy clothes that you know that are going to last for more than one season, because that way you're going to contribute. And it doesn't matter if it's not the latest in fashion. The important thing is that if it's your coat, it's keeping you warm. If they're shoes, they're going to help you exercise, etc., etc. So that could be, but I completely agree that you have to go to the source, which are the manufacturers. And as you know, there is a whole scale that I wouldn't even attempt to understand in terms of lobbying and policy, but I definitely think that I would listen to the people you vote for if they even mention things that are related to environment. Because I think that's where we can start, like select the people that are at least informed and at least concerned and at least are taking it in this scenario.